Let's begin with the Conservative leadership race, which comes to a close this weekend. 4 candidates are vying to replace Andrew Scheer in an attempt to unseat the Liberals in the next federal election. Peter McKay, Aaron O'Toole, Leslyn Lewis, and Derek Sloan. And that election could be sooner than you think. Parliament is prorogued, and when it returns, there will be a speech from the throne followed by a vote of confidence, which means the government could theoretically fall. To talk about this race and the critical timing of it, we're joined by Dan Nolan, co-chair of the Conservative Leadership Election Organizing Committee. Mr. Nolan, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, David.
We had a look at that live shot of the ballot counting rooms. I don't think we saw all 165,000 of them. That's a big logistical effort. Are things going smoothly so far?
Word is things are going smoothly. I was just on the phone with our Chief Returning Officer, Derek Vanstone, a few minutes ago, and things are going very smoothly. And as you mentioned, 165,000 ballots or over 165,000 ballots is quite an achievement, both in terms of the sheer number, which is the largest ever, but also in terms of percentage of the party voting. It's well over 60%, which that's, I think, also a new record. So we're very pleased, and I'll tell you, given the circumstances, this is a great surprise. I would have thought we would have had a real problem achieving the same totals as we had last time, let alone exceeding them. So.
Right. I mean, the party has really had to juggle and adapt, right? I mean, this was supposed to be a convention and everyone was going to get together, and now nobody can get together really in any context. So, I mean, what have you learned throughout this pandemic? Because I would imagine there are some lessons on how to adapt that could be applied to an election, should one happen.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we actually got lucky with is that our Constitution, and remember the party's Constitution was written in 2004 with the merger of the former Progressive Conservative Party and the Alliance, was that there was a mandate in the Constitution that we needed to offer mail-in ballots to our members. And actually, last time around, even though we had physical voting locations, a dozen of them across the country, 96% of our votes came via mail-in ballot. So we were quite lucky in that we knew how that process worked. The party officials knew how the process worked, and we were ready to go on that basis. And when the convention itself was eliminated, in some ways it made things easier from a process standpoint, from a risk standpoint.
Right. So the number, the 165,000 number that we talked about earlier, that's not the final tally, is it right? Or is that a running tally that will go? When will we know the final number?
That's the latest number that I heard. I believe we're over that number actually, so it'll be some number above that, but I don't know that yet, and we'll be announcing that over the course of the weekend.
I wonder if you've got any insight for us on one of the sort of the unresolved issues in this campaign, and it's the June allegations from Aaron O'Toole's campaign that someone from Mckays' team hacked their accounts and stole confidential information, something Mckays' campaign has denied, but a summer student from Greg McLean's office was fired. We've heard no one from the police has even reached out to McKay to talk to them about this. Is this something you've dealt with at the organizing committee level?
Well, we have as a rule where we don't talk about internal investigations, but what I can say, what we did put out was, in fact, Mr. O'Toole's campaign reached out, went directly to the authorities on that issue. And it never came through our process, through our dispute resolution process, and through our chief returning officer, which would be the official, as part of our process, who would investigate anything like that. So it never came to us. So that's the only thing I can say about it.
Okay, so an unconventional moment in an unconventional campaign. How important is this for the Conservatives? I mean, you gained a lot of seats in the last election. You had the most votes of any party, but the breakthroughs in like the key suburban areas, really, in Ontario and in Quebec as well, it just didn't happen. So how important is this event for the party getting ready for the next election?
Well, look, it's critical. I mean, look, going back to the last election, I think what Mr. Scheer did was, I think he did a great job in terms of that's the second most vote our party's ever received in an election campaign. It's one of the highest vote totals any party's ever received in Canadian history. We got the largest number of opposition MPs, I think, in Canadian history. So there were some real positives to take out of that. But at the end of the day, we didn't win. And this is an opportunity to reset things, and the members certainly are actively engaged. Like, as you mentioned, the 165,000 is the most votes ever, and we have almost 270,000 members, which is the most members ever, I believe, of any party. So that's Our members certainly are focused on it and are motivated, and we're in very good shape. I'm very pleasantly surprised.
You've got this one member, one vote leadership system, but it's also weighted by riding, right? So
That's right.
you know, a small riding association of say 50 members gives as much points as a large riding association of 5,000 members.
That's right.
The party's membership is uneven across the country. I mean, what do you do if you end up in a situation Sunday night where one candidate has clearly won the most individual votes, but the other candidate wins based on riding weight? I mean, does that threaten the unity of the party in any way?
No, look, I mean, our rules are very clear. In fact, last time around, the reverse happened. So, for example, Mr. Scheer's win over Mr. Bernier was quite close in terms of points, but he actually won overwhelming in terms of votes. But at the end of the day, that doesn't really matter. You know, what matters is, you know, as we did last time during the federal election, we won the most votes, but we still lost the election. And nobody's questioning Prime Minister Trudeau's legitimacy. So, you know, the person with the most points based on our system, and everybody knows the rules, and every candidate understands that, and our members, I think, understand it quite well. The person with the most points will be the legitimate winner, and that will be it. And I think you've seen by our process, and I think you had a camera. You were mentioning a camera in our processing center, but cameras have been there watching the ballots come in and being processed for weeks now. So there's a lot of transparency here, and we're very, very confident that the will of the members will be announced when we announce the results on Sunday. Mr.
Scheer was on the House last week speaking with my colleague Chris Hall, and he said one of the things that whoever wins this thing on Sunday night can't take for granted is the unity of the party. He says there's a lot of anger in places like Western Canada. We've seen the formation of the Wexit Party. I mean, how much of a challenge is this for conservative politics writ large in the country?
Well, look, I mean, I've heard about those issues out west, but you know, again, I go back to, you know, our party's in quite good shape. We're quite unified behind the idea that we would be a better government in waiting than the current government that's there. And I think that shows itself both in our fundraising numbers, in our membership numbers, and again, in the folks who took time to, you know, fill out their ballots, put in their IDs, and go through the process of mailing the ballots in, which isn't you know, there is some complication to that process, but I've been, like I said, I'm ecstatic about the results and the number of people who've taken the time to vote. So I think we're in very good shape.
Okay, so Sunday night is a big night, and we're going to have live coverage of it here on CBC News Network. What can we expect to see? How is this going to play out on Sunday night with this ranked ballot process?
So we'll be announcing each round. We have a constitutional obligation as to what we need to disclose for each round, so all the points. And one of the things we'll be doing is we will be going to different regions around the country and have prominent Canadians, prominent Conservatives announcing the results in each of those regions. So we'll be doing that. And then back in Ottawa, Lisa Raitt, my co-chair, and I will be announcing the full results for each ballot if there's more than one.
Okay, so you're going to do it region by region, not riding by
That's
riding, right? Because that could take
That's
us into Wednesday if you do it that way.
Yeah, we're not. Don't worry, we're not going to keep you that long.
All right. So. All right, well, Dan Nolan, good luck this weekend, and I'm sure we'll be talking to you on Sunday night. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
That is Dan Nolan, the co-chair of the Conservative Leadership Election Organizing Committee, speaking to us from Shediac, New Brunswick. Welcome back to Power and Politics. It's all done now but the counting. The four candidates who are vying for the Conservative Party's top job will get their answer on Sunday. Peter McKay, Erin O'Toole, Leslyn Lewis, and Derek Sloan are all hoping to replace Andrew Scheer. McKay and O'Toole are the perceived frontrunners, with newcomer Lewis seen as the race's wild card. The McKay campaign has seen a late-game fundraising surge, but O'Toole still leads in the number of individual donors. So could we see the candidate with the most votes lose to the candidate with the most points? And what would that mean? Marty, Paul, Sherelle, and Eric are back with us. So Sherelle, I'd like to start with you. The new leader gets announced Sunday night. How close do we expect this to be? Are we looking at another Scheer-Bernier type scenario?
It's a little hard to tell because you've got McKay, who's perceived to be, you know, the front runner. He has the most money. He's fresh out the gate, you know, just hitting hard everywhere he went in the country. O'Toole seemed to catch up. So we could I think we're either going to get a situation with the NDP leadership, where Jagmeet Singh was crowned after one ballot, or we're going to go a couple ballots because Leslyn Lewis is going to play spoiler for Peter McKay's, supposed coronation that everybody was predicting just a few months ago, because she's made up some real significant ground over the last few months and weeks. And those second ballots or second ranks or even first ranks, I think, are going to have a big role to play in whether or not she's gotten enough points to make it so that it's not a runaway.
So the consensus in the party, and I'm going to assume on the panel, and forgive me if I'm wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, is that this is between McKay and O'Toole, with Lewis playing the role that Sherelle talked about there. And Eric, I wonder if you can add on that, on Leslyn Lewis, what we've seen from her, what she's brought to the race, and maybe what opportunities and doors does she open for the Conservatives going forward?
Yeah, well, she was not someone without much of a profile. She had run in the 2015 federal election for the Conservatives to try to win a seat. She didn't win a seat, and really an unknown when this race began. And everybody at this point now is expecting her to at least finish in third place. She's raised a lot of money, almost $2 million up to this point in the race. If you remember back in 2017, Maxime Bernier, the fundraising leader, raised just over $2 million. So it just shows how much of a ground game that she has really been able to put together. Now, McKay is raising the most money. He's raised well over $3 million. And the poll, the only poll that we've seen in this race from Main Street that was just published a few days ago, had him in first place. I think the big question is McKay and Lewis, in the sense that McKay, how close he'll be to that 50% mark, how much above the 40% mark he is, and how much of the support ends up going to Lewis. Because if Lewis ends up in third place, Derek Sloan in fourth place, which is what is generally the consensus of what the expectations are, how much support they have as a group is really key, because most of Sloan's support is likely to go to Lewis if they rank anybody. And then it's all about what happens when Lewis drops off the ballot, if she does. If she in some way moves ahead of O'Toole, then you're talking about a completely different race. But she has certainly made a big impact on this campaign. Likely, we're going to see a lot more of her in the future for the party. So it definitely, that's one of the things that has probably been the most interesting out of a race that has been largely uninteresting.
Right. If Sloan drops off and support goes heavily to Lewis and somehow vaults her into second place, it's a total departure from, I think, the script people are expecting. But, Paul, Leslyn Lewis is fascinating in that she ran in 2015. She was a replacement candidate for Jerry Bance, most famous for peeing in a coffee mug that did not belong to him while repairing an appliance, caught on camera by CBC's Marketplace. One of the greater moments of the 2015 campaign in some way. But she's made this enormous impression, and I just wonder, what's your sense of if she can be this sort of spoiler, or what role she might have carved out for herself in the campaign, in the party going forward?
I think she's got a very solid role, especially because her support is kind of a second order effect of the fact that the two front runners, Peter McKay and Erin O'Toole, have over time found ways to disappoint a lot of people who would have liked to support them. It's eerie how much the dynamic resembles 2003, which is an epoch ago in politics. But when Peter McKay was the notional frontrunner for the progressive conservative leadership, and he needed a certain level of support, or the others were going to catch up to him, because everyone who hadn't given him their first ballot support was really not impressed with the guy. The Conservatives that I know are making the same kinds of calculations. Is it 39%? Is it 45% that McKay needs to have on the first ballot? Or he's just going to tread water again while somebody else, likely Erin O'Toole, beats him. And the Conservative Party is a party that has narrowed and deepened its appeal to people who've, it used to appeal to people who normally voted Liberal, sometimes voted NDP. Lately, it's a party that mostly appeals to lifelong Conservatives. It's going to need to broaden its appeal, to expand its tent. And a lot of Conservatives I know think that Leslyn Lewis might be a good, strong part of that.
So, Marty, just on that, the consensus still is it's between McKay and O'Toole to lose. Lewis has been the revelation of the race and established herself as a potential key player going forward. Sloan, though, is someone who has been a bit more of a flashpoint. If, as expected, he drops off on the first ballot, is there a future for a guy like Derek Sloan in this party if they need to broaden their support out from sort of the lifelong conservatives, as Paul just identified it?
I hope not. I think the party, in order to do anything, has to basically repudiate its social conservative wing. I watched that French debate less than a year ago, face à face on TVA, where Andrew, obviously this was a debate that would happen with Justin Trudeau having been in power for 4 years. It should be a referendum on his leadership. Sat on camera and sweated out flop sweat for 9 minutes as he was, nailed on the issue of abortion. If you don't repudiate that aspect of the party, I don't see how they're gonna do any better this time around. Leslie Lewis, yes, it's great that we have someone that isn't an old white guy running, but she has some of those values, and unfortunately, I think, as Peter McKay himself said, that's almost like a stinking albatross around the neck of the party. The other thing, too, is I think that you can't run, whoever wins can't really, and this has been said before, but can't just run on simple Trudeau hate. And so, just as far as Peter McKay said, there's two nice things I can say about him is that he does realize that we have to repudiate that aspect of the conservatives, and also that he started off his campaign, insulting Trudeau's manhood, calling Indigenous protesters thugs, and encouraging vigilantism when it came to the I Don't Know More stuff. To his credit, he realized it was a bad look, and we haven't seen very much of that recently. So there you go.
Okay. All right. We're running out of time, but I want to get a quick prediction. Who wins and on what ballot? So, Marty, you first, then Sherelle, then Paul, and then Eric. Marty?
Oy, I'm always wrong about these things, but McKay second ballot.
McKay second ballot. Sherelle?
Oh, I'm going to say, just to mix it up, I'll say McKay third ballot.
Paul?
I like the lawyer from Nova Scotia.
Okay.
There's two of them. One of them's going to win.
Okay, so that's 3 for McKay. Eric, what do you think? Are you allowed to make a prediction? Is that against the journalistic standards and practices of the CBC? Am I getting you in trouble?
Well, I'm not going to make a prediction, but I think it'll be, if McKay doesn't win on the first, it's got to go to the last ballot. So that's the closest of a prediction I'll make. Okay,
all predictions wrong or your money back. Thank you all very much. That's Marty Patrickin, Sherelle Evelyn, Paul Wells, and Eric Grenier. Thanks, folks. It is all over but the counting in the Conservative leadership race, as today was the last day for party members to get their ballots in to decide who should replace Andrew Scheer. Here's a live shot of the ballot holding area. This, we're told, is called the escalation room, which sounds ominous. The deadline for your vote to count was 5 o'clock Eastern. That was a cutoff. If it didn't get in by then, it is not going to be counting. It's all being done by mail because of the pandemic. We're told more than 165,000 votes have already been cast, making it the highest turnout for the election of a federal party leader in Canadian history. And as you know, there's 4 candidates who are vying to replace Andrew Scheer: Leslie Lewis, Peter McKay, Erin O'Toole, and Derek Sloan. We're going to find out what's happening on Sunday night. Who will lead into a federal election that could be coming sooner than you think, because Parliament is prorogued, and when the Liberal government returns, there's going to be a speech from the throne, followed by a confidence vote, which means there's a chance the government could fall. To talk about this race and the candidates, I'm joined by 3 Conservatives. James Moore is a former Industry and Heritage Minister under former Prime Minister Stephen Harper. He is now a senior advisor at Dentons and joins us from Vancouver. Shakir Chambers is a senior consultant at Navigator. He is in Toronto. And Jenny Byrne is a former top staffer to Prime Minister Stephen Harper and Premier Doug Ford. She's now a principal at Jenny Byrne and Associates, and she is in a car somewhere in Ontario, and she is not driving. She is a passenger. So before the angry tweets come, safety first, Jenny Byrne.
And my seatbelt is on. I just apologize if anyone is going to get car sick watching this.
All right, we're going to start with you in case you drive out of signal range. Based on everything we've heard this week and where things are right now, what's your prediction, Jenny Byrne, on what we're going to see Sunday night? How is this going to play out?
Well, listen, I think the party's trying to make it as exciting as they can. As you said, from what I've heard from campaigns, it looks like probably at the end of the day, the ballots are going to be closer. The number is going to be closer to 80,000 ballots cast. So I think what we're going to see is, the results of a greatly fought race, and as well as some surprises. I think you've seen Leslyn Lewis, who hit the $2 million mark in terms of fundraising yesterday. So I think you're going to see a surprise in terms of the support that she has.
Well, who do you think is going to win?
Whoever gets the most votes.
Well, okay. All right. So we're not going to get a prediction from Jenny Byrne other than the high scorer wins. Well, actually, it'd be most points. It might not be most votes because it is weighted by riding as well. So, Shakir, what scenario do you think we're going to see roll out on Sunday night live here on CBC News Network and CBC Television?
I think it really depends. I think if it's a first ballot victory, I think the McKay team has been running in the front for the majority of this campaign. But I think as we go forward, if we go into second ballot and third ballot, I think as Sloan, and if it is Lewis that's in third, as those candidates drop off, some of that support might go to Erin O'Toole. And if that does happen, I mean, it really throws things up in the air, and it's no guarantee. It's going to be we're not sure who will win that race, right? So I do think Mr. O'Toole and Mr. Mckay are the front runners, but I think there's a lot to be decided at the end of the day.
James, is that your sense of it? The more ballots it goes, the trickier it gets for Peter McKay. Does he need to win on ballot 1 or 2 to close this up?
I don't know that that's true. I mean, look, this is, we've all seen leadership races where people have tried to game these things out going in, and it's really hard to tell. I mean, the voting dynamic here of people voting in their kitchens, putting in the mailbox and seeing how it's going to go, we'll see. I mean, one dynamic about conservatives, I think that's important for people to understand, and one of the key differences that I've always held between liberals and conservatives, liberals need to love their leaders. Conservatives need to respect their leaders, and respect is driven by policy and the capacity of that person to fulfill the delivery of real conservative policies. The Conservative Party is truly an ideas party, and it is driven by policy, whereas liberals, it's driven by power and it's driven by affection for the people who are running for the leadership. So in this leadership race, there's been a lot of talk about policy, and I think the reason why Leslyn Lewis particularly has done well on the fundraising side, Peter McKay has done extraordinarily well, and Erin O'Toole, is that the focus has really been on a series of policy ideas that have been driven the core of the Conservative Party for a very long time. And I think that is going to show itself out, I think, throughout not only the night on the weekend, but also in the weeks and days thereafter, the consolidation of the party around policies that are always at the core of the Conservative Party.
James, just to stick with you, you mentioned fundraising and you mentioned respect. Peter McKay has raised more money than anybody else, about $3 million, which is a pretty good sign of respect. I mean, should we read anything into the money being raised as a sign of how this might go on Sunday?
Well, look, Peter's been around politics for a long time. First came into Parliament in 1997, so well over 20 years. He's got a brand and a team and an organization behind him that's extraordinarily impressive. A lot of the people who have been working on the digital side of his campaign are people who are behind Maxime Bernier's successful fundraising juggernaut in the last leadership race itself. But Erin O'Toole has done very well himself, and Leslyn Lewis has as well, focusing on issues that the base want addressed within the context of a Conservative Party moving forward. So I think all three of those folks have done incredibly well, and I think it speaks to the shift of traditional fundraising away from big ticket dinners and all that stuff and old school networks to grassroots policy-driven micro donors who are driven by a passion for ideas that they want to see at the core of the new Conservative Party as we move forward.
Jenny, I want to pick up something that Andrew Scheer, in his exit interview with Chris Hall on the House last week, raised, where he said that whoever comes in and wins this thing kind of can't take for granted party unity, that because of unrest in places like the West, that this is a real thing. We've seen the reemergence of a Wexit party. What's the first thing the new leader should be doing on dealing with this issue that Mr. Scheer has raised?
Listen, I agree with Andrew on that. I think that party unity is actually going to be the most important thing that the leader is going to have to address right off the bat. I think it won't just be a regional divide in terms of policy or support, but it's pretty chippy leadership race. And so whoever wins is going to have to make sure that the party is united, because we're heading into a fall with a Liberal government seemingly who wants to find some way to trigger an election before they have to the economic consequences and the seemingly corrupt decisions that they've made in terms of how program spending has done. They'd like to go to the polls before that. So whoever wins is going to have to make sure the party is ready and the party is united heading into the fall.
Shakir, what do you think the first thing is that the leader should be doing on Monday morning after you have your victory speech, on Sunday night? The job begins to try to defeat Justin Trudeau and knit the party back together again after a chippy leadership race, as Jenny describes it. What's the first act that should be done?
So I do agree with Jenny on that. I think party unity is priority number one. We have to ensure that all factions are together and moving in the same direction. But I also think ultimately we have to put forth a vision. To what Mr. Moore just said, we have to ensure that we have policies that can contrast what the Liberals are going to put forth. And not just saying that tax cuts are great or just micro-targeting tax credits, but what is our vision? What are some conservative solutions to the major issues facing Canadians today? And I think that's a priority to articulate to ensure that Canadians know that they can trust us with their vote whenever we have our next general election.
James, how do you knit things back together when you have one campaign, in Erin O'Toole's campaign, calling the cops on Peter McKay's campaign? I mean, that's a big step beyond your usual sort of chippy leadership campaign. I mean, do you see a way where Peter McKay and Erin O'Toole can work together after someone's called 911?
Well, I suspect that'll stop after the election on Sunday night as we have a new leader going forward. To your point, though, about Andrew Scheer, look, Andrew Scheer understood very well, and I think his warning is apt and should be taken by both Erin and Peter, regardless of which of them wins. Andrew Scheer won with 51% of the vote. He had a falling out with Brad Trost. He had a falling out with Maxime Bernier. He had a falling out with Kelly Leitch. And all that stuff, I think, made it really challenging for him to cobble the party back together into a unified force under his leadership. One of the, I think, silver linings of this leadership race that I don't think has gone unobserved is that if you look at the caucus endorsements of both Erin O'Toole and Peter McKay, they both have broad cross-section of support. They're both regionally balanced. They both have multi-generations of conservative support, and they both have support from inside and outside of Quebec. They both have support from social and fiscal conservatives. They both have support from people who have been traditionally in the legacy parties of the Reform and Canadian Alliance and the progressive conservative side. And they both have a broad, balanced support, I think, ideologically within the conservative movement. So I think that speaks, frankly, to the narrow gap on policy that exists between Peter McKay and Erin O'Toole. And I think it speaks to the broad appeal that both of them have to the broadness of the conservative movement. They can't take it for granted. They have to keep working at it, but you build your caucus support and then you build it out from there. And I think both of them understand that because they've seen the successes that Stephen Harper had in doing that, and they've seen the challenges that Andrew Scheer had in doing that. So I think they will both recognize that if either of them are successful on Sunday night, and they will understand that lesson of success moving forward.
Jenny, James outlines that broad level of support that the two frontrunners are seen to have. I mean, that speaks to the testament of both candidates in this race, but couldn't those broad levels of support also become camps within the party going forward? I mean, given the tense competition between the two leaders, the two candidates.
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think that I think there's probably some chippiness between the candidates. I'm sure there's chippiness between their campaign teams, but I don't think that the average member feels the same way. I think there's probably a number of people that cast a ballot for Peter McKay and voted for Erin O'Toole second. So I'm with James on this. I remember back in 2004 when Stephen Harper united the party after he won the leadership race. And if you look here in Ontario, Doug Ford did the exact same thing. Christine Elliott, his main opponent, was named deputy leader. She's now deputy premier, and senior people from all the other leadership campaigns were brought in right away to be part of his campaign team. So there's a history of conservative leaders who reach out in the early days after a leadership race to make sure the party's united.
Yeah, Shakir, it's easy to see that McKay, win or lose, has a spot here. O'Toole, win or lose, has a spot here. And Leslyn Lewis has really been, in a lot of ways, one of the revelations of this particular race. But what about the future of Derek Sloan? Some of the things he said very early in this campaign were kind of controversial. He is doubling down on issues that were seen as difficult for the party in the last election. What do you do with Derek Sloan going forward if you're the new leader?
Well, listen, I still think Derek Sloan represents a part of the party. You don't have to agree with everything he says, but there is some truth to this undercurrent of always being politically correct, worrying about offending people by your positions. I think there is something to that. But I think if you are leader of the Conservative Party, a member of the party, you have to always listen to those voices and what they have to say. So I don't think there's going to be a situation where you just abandon or turn your back on Derek Sloan. Ultimately, I think him coming into the race, he had to make a name for himself, right? He wasn't a very well-known MP at the time. He might have done some things earlier on or said some things earlier on that maybe didn't play out the way he expected it to. But at the end of the day, he is an MP. He is elected by his constituents. If his constituents constituents choose to have him as their elected representative, I mean, you have to go ahead with that.
Okay, we're out of time. We're going to leave it there. I want to thank you all. Jenny Byrne, good luck getting to your final destination. I want to thank you all. Jenny Byrne, Shakir Chambers, and James Moore. Thanks so much.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.